Samuel, Kings, Chronicles. In this chapter we want to consider 6 history books which God has given to us. These books tell us all about the Jewish kings who ruled in the land of Palestine, from the first king, Saul, to the very last king who ruled before the Babylonians conquered the land. See chapter 1 under Crown and Captivity. As we look at these 6 books, we discover that they are a series of 3 double books: the 2 books of Samuel, the 2 books of Kings, and the 2 books of Chronicles. What do each of these books tell us about? 1 Samuel. This book begins with Samuel and ends with the death of King Saul. It is also about the life of David before he became king. 2 Samuel. This book is about the reign of David. 1 Kings. This book begins with King David's death and ends with the death of wicked King Ahab. 2 Kings. This book tells about all the rest of the kings until the fall of Israel in 722 BC and the fall of Judah in 586 BC. 1 Chronicles. This book is about the reign of David. 2 Chronicles. This book begins with Solomon and ends with the Babylonian captivity. Here is another way to think about these 6 books. In light of this chart, please answer these questions. Which is the only book which tells us about King Saul's reign? Blank. Which 2 books tell us about King David's reign? Blank. Which book tells us about David before he was king of Israel? Blank. Which book covers the same period of history as the books of 1 and 2 Kings? Blank. Underscore. Blank. Which 2 books end with the Babylonian captivity? Blank. Underscore. Blank. The books of Samuel, King Saul and King David. We are now ready to think about the first set of double books, the 2 books of Samuel. The book of 1 Samuel tells us about Israel's first king, King Saul. The book of 2 Samuel tells us about Israel's second king, King David. Main characters in 1 Samuel. Main character in 2 Samuel. Samuel, David, Saul. David. Why are these books called by the name of Samuel? Samuel was a godly man, a great priest and a great prophet. Samuel was like bridge between the period of the judges and the period of the kings. These 2 books are called by the name Samuel for 2 reasons. Samuel is the main character at the beginning of the book of 1 Samuel. Everything we know about the birth, life, ministry, and death of Samuel is found in the book of 1 Samuel. Samuel anointed Saul and David, and the books of Samuel are all about these 2 men. Samuel anointed Saul in 1 Samuel 10. 1 and the book of 1 Samuel is all about King Saul. Samuel anointed David in 1 Samuel 16:13 and the book of 2 Samuel is all about King David and his reign. These men were the first 2 kings of Israel and the books of Samuel tell us the stories of these 2 men. The beginning of the kingdom. During the time of the judges, did Israel have a human king? Judges 21:25. Blank. God himself was supposed to be their king. But as we saw in chapter 4 of these notes, The children of Israel did not want God to rule over them, they wanted to be their own king. Later in the days of Samuel, the children of Israel wanted blank 1 Samuel 8:5 just like all the other nations. Did they want the Lord to be their king and to rule and reign over them? 1 Samuel 8:7. By asking for a human king, who were they rejecting? 1 Samuel 8:7. Blank _____. Sometimes God gives people what they ask for in order to teach them a lesson and make them learn the hard way. God did give the people a king. He gave them the king of their choice. His name was Saul. Why did Saul seem like the perfect king? 1 Samuel 9:2. Blank ____. How did the people look at Saul? 1 Samuel 16:7. Blank How did God look at Saul? 1 Samuel 16:7. Blank ___. Saul turned out to be a complete failure as king. The people were wrong but God was right. Let's briefly compare the first two kings of Israel. Saul. David. A man after the people's heart, 1 Samuel 8:5. A man after God's heart, 1 Samuel 13:14. He was the people's choice. He was God's choice. He disobeyed God's word, 1 Samuel 15:11. He obeyed God's word, Acts 13:22. In much of the book of 1 Samuel we see Saul chasing after David, trying to kill him. This is the kind of a man he was. In the last chapter of 1 Samuel we see Saul, defeated and dead, on the field of battle. The key verse. The key verse in the books of Samuel is found in 1 Samuel 2:30. Look especially at the last part of the verse. For them that me I will honor, and they that despise me shall be lightly esteemed. What is God saying? This verse has both good news and bad news. The good news: if you honor God, then God will honor you. The person who honors God considers God as someone who is very valuable and important. This person says, God is so great and so important to me that I must believe what he says and do what he says all the days of my life. The bad news: if a person fails to honor God and despises God, then God will consider that person of little importance and God's blessing will not be on that person's life. This person says, God is not very important to me at all. I really do not care what God says. What God says means very little to me. In the books of Samuel we see how this truth was carried out in the lives of men. We can see how God honored those who honored him. We can also see how God cursed those who despised him. In the books of Samuel we learn about men who honored God and men who did not honor God. Those who honored God, those who despised God. Samuel. Eli, the priest Jonathan, Saul's son King Saul. David. To see the amazing way God honored David, read 2 Samuel chapter 7. Absalom, David's son. Which column would you fit in? Are you a person who honors God, or are you a person who despises God? Is God very important to you? Is God's word very important to you? Do you really care about what God has said? Do you really care about obeying God and doing what He says? What kind of a person do you want to be? A person like David or a person like Saul? Most people choose to be like Saul. They do not choose to honor God. Will you be one of the few people, like David, who chooses to honor God?